freight train of habit which is bearing down on me in that moment. And this may be the kind of resistance that we need to engage in. Invest in mindfulness. Invest in your own freedom with every step. And the resting is a precondition for healing. The amazing thing about the healing is that it's not really something that you have to do. It's something that you have to allow. Your body, your mind, your heart, they know very well how to heal. But maybe we have learned not to trust and to look for external solutions. So the healing isn't necessarily about doing more, finding another fix, even another therapy. It might be about doing less, much less. And this is another aspect of stopping. Creating space, saying no. And there's an aspect of freedom in that. We have this part of our brain called the frontal lobes, right? The neocortex and the frontal lobes, and that's generally what's thought to be the part of our brain that distinguishes us from other animals. It's what gives us all of our cherished human characteristics. Language and theory of mind and self-consciousness. The ability to ask big questions. And so, at least for me, when I first learned about the frontal lobes and the neocortex, I sort of thought this must be a part of the brain where there's a lot of kind of intense processing going on and choosing, and that's where my kind of agency comes from, and my freedom, my free will. That's what makes me, me. That's my kind of conscious mind. Turns out this is not really true. And I don't know whether you're aware, but in these days there's a big debate. There has been an ongoing debate for many centuries, but particularly now there's a debate about free will. Do we actually have free will? And generally speaking, the scientific and philosophical consensus is no, we don't. It's very strange. Even Einstein believed that we don't have any kind of free will at all. That everything is just the playing out of causes and conditions of essentially a mechanical universe, just operating according to physical law, and all we have is the illusion of choice, the illusion of free will. Now, that doesn't feel very inspiring. I mean, it's not a very uplifting outlook, and yet it is the commonly held outlook by most modern philosophers and scientists. Not everyone, but the majority. And what is very often cited as part of the evidence for us not having this free will is a series of experiments that were done about sort of voluntary action. So there was a guy called Liebet. Charles Liebet? I don't remember his first name. Anyway, so he did these experiments in around 1985, and they're EEG, so you put electrodes on the scalp, and then what he was looking at was the sort of voluntary control of the hand. And what they found, and this was already known in the past, was that there's something called a readiness potential, which happens about 1 second before the movement. So you can see something happening in the brain, which is sort of preparing the movement about 1 second before, and we already knew that. But what he was surprised by, and what everybody was surprised by, was that the self-reported moment of conscious volition of choosing to move the hand or not was about 0.2 seconds after the readiness potential was measured in the brain. So it seemed like the body and the brain already knew what the person was going to choose to do. Right? So it seems like the part of us that we think is choosing is just kind of after the fact. It's an illusion of choice. The decision's already made, and we're just kind of telling ourselves a story that I chose to move. But in fact, you can see evidence in the brain and the kind of muscle preparation that the choice had already been made. And so those experiments have been refined and repeated over the decades since then. And I think the most recent one found up to 7 seconds sort of evidence of movement priming before the decision, so-called decision. There's an enormous amount of time in neurological terms. 7 seconds before your body already knows what you're going to choose to do. So everybody then cites this and says, well, you see, we don't have any free will, it's all an illusion. But it's not quite as simple as that. So it turns out that our frontal lobes, most of what they do is not initiating, it's inhibiting. Very strange. So we usually think of inhibiting as something negative, but in fact, so this is Joseph Ledoux, who's a very well-known researcher in the field, and he says the cortex's job is to prevent the inappropriate response rather than to produce the appropriate one. So in fact, the whole of the brain and the body is constantly producing impulses, things that you could do, and the cortex's job is to say no, 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 and sometimes not to say no. Right? Which is also not initiating, it's just, okay, this time I won't say no, and then the action happens. So out of all the many, many impulses, mostly what you are, this kind of amazing frontal lobe is doing is to say no, I won't. And the interesting thing is that actually between the readiness potential and the decision, there is time for the frontal lobes to intervene and to veto the impulse. So there's a readiness potential, you're priming, you're getting ready to act, but you still have time to say no, I won't. And that's very interesting for us as practitioners. Very interesting. There's a zone of freedom. And it may be small. It may be very small at first. I think, to a large extent, the philosophers and scientists are actually correct. Mostly, we do not have free will. Mostly, we have the illusion of free will. Mostly, but not completely. Think of when you're watching a movie, and let's say it's a really good movie, and it's really engaging, and you're really kind of like involved in the story. In that event, you have no freedom. You don't choose anything. But you feel like the people, the characters in the film, are all free. They're choosing. They have free will. They're like you. But if you stop for a moment and reflect, you know it's all scripted. It's all been recorded. Every frame, every action, every response, all preordained. It's all been decided in advance. But you still feel like everybody in the story is free. They're choosing. You know that they're not, but you feel like they are. Because you don't know what's going to happen next. Right? You don't know what's going to come, so you feel like, it's still open. Anything could happen. Even if it's actually very predictable what's going to happen. You know, the hero's going to win, they're going to save the world, everything will be fine. You know exactly what's going to happen, but you feel like anything could happen. So it's just an example, but maybe that example can shed light on our daily life. That maybe actually that's how we spend most of our daily life. Just being, kind of pushed, conditioned, prodded, primed by what we consume, by our interactions, by our own impulses. But we feel free because we don't know what's going to happen next. But actually we're just sort of, a ball rolling along a channel. Mostly. So it's just an example, something to reflect on. So what freedom could we have? Well, when you're watching the movie, the freedom you have is to turn it off, to say no, to say stop. And in our normal daily life, the freedom maybe that we have is to notice the impulse and go, oh, I don't have to. Amazing. There's an impulse, it may be strong, and then you go, but I don't have to do it. I'll give you an example. Early on in my monastic life, there was a situation in Vietnam which involved a large number of our brothers and sisters who were being targeted by the government, and it was a very tense situation. The whole monastery in the highlands was surrounded by police, although it wasn't acknowledged that they were police, and there were lots of rumors and speculation, but essentially they were being cut off. Their electricity was cut off, the gas was cut off, the water was cut off, and they lived like that for 3 months or more, and people were trying to find ways to smuggle bottles of water in, throwing them over the fence, and they were collecting rainwater, and it was a whole drama. Anyway, a number of us had to go to the EU Parliament and the Commission for Human Rights to try to raise awareness of the situation and to see if we could intervene in some way. And it happened that I was part of that delegation, and I was in this particular day I was in a meeting with some of these people, and Sister Chang Kong and a number of other brothers and sisters. We were sitting around a table, and we were trying to share the story of what we knew was really happening on the ground in Vietnam. And so Sister Chang Kong was sharing, maybe one of my sisters shared very eloquently, and I wanted to share something. And I noticed the impulse. I really wanted to share. But perhaps because I had been practicing mindfulness, I'd been doing my walking meditation, my sitting meditations, I had a kind of reserve. I had a little more awareness that gave me more time. The zone of freedom was a little bit more than usual, so I could notice the impulse. Now, this is interesting because we speak about our conscious mind, right, what is in the realm of our conscious mind, and my sense with the practice is that we can expand into what may usually be unconscious impulses and drives. We start to become aware of them, we start to notice them. And that's not always pleasant, right? You may start to notice some things you don't much like the look of. And in this particular instance, there I was sitting there, and I noticed this impulse. And the first thing is to think, yeah, and I should share. This is important. I have something important to say. It's significant. I've got to share it. But then I noticed something, like a quality in that impulse, something that I kind of felt pushed by it. And I think with the practice, what we develop is an aversion to being pushed around, including by ourselves. Right? It's like you get the smell of it, you get the savor of compulsion. And when you recognize it, when you see it coming, you're like, no, not anymore. I say stop. And because I had that little bit more mindfulness than usual, I could see it coming, I could be aware of its quality, I could see that there's this element of compulsion in it, and I got to have a look. What is really going on? And what I found out was that in that moment, what I wanted was not just to contribute an important point to the discussion and, help my brothers and sisters in Vietnam. No. What I wanted was to be recognized. I wanted these strangers, these people who were sort of important, politicians, EU ministers or whatever, that I wanted them to think I was intelligent, basically. It's kind of not very beautiful. But that's what I saw. I suddenly realized, I'm in a room with people I don't know, and the first thing I want to do is make sure that they know I'm intelligent. Ugh, yuck. Right? It's yuck. It's really yucky. But I saw it. And I saw that maybe my whole life I've been doing that. I'm not accustomed to being in the background. I'm not accustomed to being in a room and sort of not contributing or not saying anything. I'm not used to that. So when I'm in that situation, it's very uncomfortable. And the first thing I want to do is get in there and say something impressive. And then everyone's like, oh yeah, this guy, he's really got something to offer. Or whatever. It doesn't even go that far, but it's an impulse, right? But I saw it. And because I saw it, because I recognized this flavor of compulsion, of kind of addictive, that little fix, that little dopamine hit I was going to get, I saw it, I could catch it, and I could say, stop. Don't need to. What a relief. What a relief. And of course there's some discomfort in the initial act of resistance. It is an act of resistance. And this may be the kind of resistance that we need to engage in. To resist the compulsion, whatever it is. But when I could endure that discomfort, there's some discomfort, then what I found is relief. Wow. There's actually a joy that comes from being free, from being able to say no. And that joy and that freedom is not experienced only by you, it is your entire lineage. Because that compulsion didn't just come from me. That's my parents and my grandparents and my ancestors, and they've all been doing that for how many generations? Like a freight train of habit, which is bearing down on me in that moment. And what makes the difference, whether I have the strength or not to say stop to that immense force coming down, is whether or not I've been maintaining my daily practice. That's really what's going to make a difference. So when you ask yourself in the day-to-day practice, sometimes you don't feel inspired to go to walking meditation or sitting meditation, or you feel like, I don't know, what difference does it make? I go again and again, be aware of my steps. And sometimes, you don't feel inspired. But just remember, every single moment of mindfulness, of just recognizing what is going on now, in my sensations, in my feelings, my mind, my perceptions, everything that you can recognize is going to be strengthening that reserve, increasing that reserve of mindfulness, and that is what will make the difference. That is your freedom in the difficult moments. So invest in mindfulness. Invest in your own freedom with every step